Revelation.
Hey everybody, welcome to the podcast. It is November 11th, Veterans Day. Armistice Day for those of you who are older. Welcome. Don't forget to engage the channel, like, subscribe. Leave a comment, share the podcast. All right, so the Senate votes to reopen the government. I had a little miscue yesterday. I thought the vote had already happened on Sunday night. It happened last night. It proves that the Democrats engineered the shutdown, the longest shutdown in American history, and wanted it to continue. So now the extremist progressives are apoplectic as the shutdown is over, broken by defecting moderate Democrats. A lot of these Democrats are not running for re-election, so they really have nothing to lose. But they wanted the American people to suffer. We're going to have over, I don't know, I think it was about 25 headlines, 20-something headlines. So we're going to get out in a reasonable amount of time, under an hour probably today. Also, we're going to be covering the fact that the Supreme Court of the United States is going to take up the case of mail-in ballots. I wish they would take up the case of mail-in ballots as a whole, but they're not doing that. They're taking up the case of whether mail-in ballots can be accepted after Election Day, counted after Election Day, even if they're postmarked before Election Day. A lot of these rules put in during COVID were ridiculous and invite fraud. And we're going to get into that a little bit today. So why don't we get into the headlines? Let's read the news. Swear. We're going to start with the New York Times, though. This is a story that broke yesterday. And now Trump is threatening to sue the BBC for $1 billion after January 6th documentary. Lawyer for President Trump said the BBC editing of a speech that Trump gave was defamatory. Of course it was. The broadcaster apologized on Monday in an error of judgment. And my whole point about this is why the BBC would even do such a thing. So the BBC is basically controlled by MI5, like the mainstream media is controlled here in the United States by the CIA. But it's a different situation because the BBC is actually a state broadcaster. And so MI5 has full run over what the BBC airs and what they report on and what. So this was obviously, as I mentioned many times before, this was obviously an attempt to smear Trump. And it was done by the ruling class who controls the intelligence agencies, who really control government, et cetera, et cetera. As long as you have the information, the intelligence, there's much you could do. You could predict the future for the most part. All right, so let's get into other headlines for today. We're going to go back to Fox News. And the main story for today, Senate ends 41-day government shutdown stalemate, sends bipartisan deal to the House. Funding package heads to House after 8 Senate Democrats abandoned demand for an Obamacare subsidies deal. And we're going to get into what Obamacare is, the Affordable Care Act, which is just a euphemism. It didn't make healthcare really affordable. It just offered health care to everybody, that aspect always stayed in place. Trump insisted that you have to give insurance to people, but they got rid of the mandate. And basically what it is, it's a giveaway to insurance companies. But the thing is what they're not reporting on, Fox did report on it on Sunday, is that there was a deal for these 8 Democrats to come across. And the deal was a minibus bill, which would reinstate furloughed workers that Trump fired, and then they would get back pay. So there was a deal. It wasn't, the Democrats didn't just cave. There was some sort of deal, but it didn't involve $1.5 trillion of healthcare subsidies, which we're going to talk about as we move forward today. So let's get into the chimping out of the extremist progressives. Mediaite, oh, fuck off. Democrats rage at pathetic shutdown betrayal and mass backlash. Of course, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, the average monthly SNAP benefit is $177 a person. A person like for everybody, or just people that are too poor or don't want to work. So they get $177 for groceries per month. And that's really not that much. The average ACA benefit is up to $550 per person per month. So she's weighing those two things. Is that it? But in any case, for indigent, you're talking about a $700 subsidy for these people that want their money when it isn't really their money. It's the taxpayer money. It's people that actually pay taxes, pay for their subsidies for their SNAP and for their ACA subsidy. And then what makes me mad is then these poor people that receive these benefits, then they're mad or they show belligerence towards people that actually go to work every day, pay their taxes, which ends up subsidizing the fact that these people don't work. And I don't mean to go off on poor people. There are a lot of reasons people can't get employed. I don't want to go down that road. And race, a lot of times, is a factor, but it's not the only factor. So I don't want to go down that rabbit hole right now. But Governor Pritzker says this is not a deal. It's an empty promise. Trump and the Republican Congress, of course, he's blaming Republicans again, are making healthcare more expensive for the middle class and ending it for working families. It's not necessarily true. They're ending specifically the subsidy, which was expanded under COVID because people weren't working under Biden, and the Democrats insisted on keeping it after COVID. It's the same thing with the mail-in ballots, which was supposed to be a fix for the 2020 election when people were afraid to go to the polls because of contracting a man-made virus. But they kept it. They kept it anyway. They kept the mail-in ballots after COVID, which were supposed to be for COVID, and the same thing with the subsidy, the increased subsidy. And there's no way that the Republicans were going to keep the increased subsidy. A, because we don't need it anymore because COVID is over. And also, all conservatives have a problem with the overall subsidy, period. Time for Democrats to stand for affordable health care. But the point is, the government doesn't have a money tree. The cost has to come from somewhere. Originally, the Affordable Care Act was subsidized by the government, the Obama administration, raiding Fannie and Freddie Mac, which are mortgage subsidies and lending for unqualified people by the U.S. government so they can get their first homes. So you're robbing Peter to pay Paul, so to speak. Adam Park Homenko, fuck off Shahan. This Shahan was one of the defecting senators. We have a guaranteed vote by a guaranteed date. There's no guarantee that this will become law. There was never a guarantee that it would become law. And that's just going on into what they were talking about. And then the zero hedge, as the article, infighting boils over after a handful of Democrats vote to reopen government. How quickly the tone of the Democrat Party has changed, and this is the point. In the past week, only a few days ago, they were boasting about a blue wave after winning a small number of elections they were guaranteed to win regardless. I mean, there wasn't really a guarantee, but they were in blue states and blue districts. Some even cited the ongoing government shutdown as a catalyst for their victories in New York City, New Jersey, and Virginia. This might have emboldened a number of leftists to carry the shutdown further. Of course they did. Bernie Sanders says, let's keep it going. And now all the extremists are coming out into the light and chastising the moderate Democrats for saying, we can't continue this. We're making our constituents suffer for the point of political leverage, which is supposed to be for the reasoning of helping the American people. So you're hurting the American people to help the American people. How does that work? The reason being is this is why Democrats like spending and grifters like spending is because the more money that goes into circulation, the velocity of money increases. When you're spending $1.5 trillion, no matter who it goes to, the insurance companies or whatever, some of that money is going to come back to you if you okayed the spending or helped okay the spending. It's called a kickback. And there are a lot of different ways that they can be received, these kickbacks. And the article goes on to say, by every metric, the Affordable Care Act has made health care worse, not better. Yet another Democratic failure that they refuse to acknowledge. That is because the Affordable Care Act is an Affordable Care Act. It was a giveaway to the insurance companies because it mandated people to get insurance. That mandate was taken away. The Supreme Court ruled that it was unconstitutional. The Hill, Democrat lawmaker, Schumer should be replaced. Ro Khanna, Democrat of California, is calling on Senate Democrats to replace Senator Chuck Schumer, who's the Senate Minority Leader, as leader. After 8 members of the Senate Democrat caucus voted Sunday to begin the process of reopening the federal government. Mind you, the government probably won't reopen till Thursday or maybe even over the weekend. Funding has to be issued, has to go into place, and what have you. And so they're not reporting on this minibus. Apparently, there are a couple laws that are going to be passed. Maybe the Democrats are going to vote against these laws. It doesn't matter because the House, the Republicans have a House in the majority, and the Republicans with these senators will have a filibuster-proof vote in the Senate. So apparently the minibus, as I mentioned, is going to restore furloughed workers. So the defecting Democrats are getting something. So Ro Khanna is a progressive Democrat who represents Silicon Valley, argued on social media that if Schumer can't keep his caucus unified against government funding bill that doesn't extend enhanced health insurance subsidies, then he shouldn't lead Senate Democrats. So that's what the Hill reports. And the Hill doesn't elaborate what are the enhanced health insurance subsidies. So Obamacare is a subsidized health insurance program, particularly for people that are poor, that don't have money. They get all the subsidizing. If you have money, you have to pay for the insurance just like everybody else. So your health care isn't made more affordable. It's not really a health care. It's not the Affordable Care Act as much as it's giving health insurance for people that can't afford it. If you can't afford it, you still have to pay for it. So let's get down to the heart of the matter. Just the News has the headline, the Obamacare secret at the heart of the shutdown. Insurers made billions at taxpayer expense. That's the point of we knew this from the beginning. If you didn't know, when they were debating the Affordable Care Act and when it passed, everybody knew it was a giveaway to the insurance companies. The insurance companies basically wrote the bill. The nation's largest healthcare insurance companies have seen good business since Obamacare was first passed in 2010 and fully implemented in 2014. This has come as no small part because of federal government subsidies to the insurance industry, which government estimates show total $1.8 trillion in 2023 alone. That's what I mean, is people that wouldn't have had health insurance got health insurance, but it was still paid for, but it was paid for by the government. So customers that the insurance companies would never have because they couldn't afford health insurance were getting paid. So there was it 30 million adults in America couldn't afford health insurance. And so those people were given health insurance and the government paid for it. So that money, $1.8 trillion, trillion, not billion, $1 trillion in 2023 alone was above and beyond what the insurance companies usually made. So if you don't think that's a giveaway to the insurance companies, and nothing changed about the way insurance companies and HMO work, they still work the same way, which means they can't refuse you insurance, but they can refuse you care. Cancer drugs and other things. Like I said, I think a modicum of healthcare should be provided, but it should be poor. I'm not talking about Medicare. I'm talking about before you reach 65. Those subsidies were greatly expanded under the Biden administration during COVID pandemic as an emergency measure, but the Democrats have fought to keep them permanent. And that's as the Hill put it, the enhanced measures. And now we're going to move over to PJ Media. If the issue is affordability, Democrats, addressing Democrats here, then why do you make everything less affordable? This is the fact. Okay, so it's like 23%. And nobody talks about the overall inflation rate from the Biden administration. They're talking about it was at a high at 9%. But you have to compound the highest of 9% by the previous 6%, by the previous 7%, by the previous 6%, 5%, etc. Or vice versa. So it's compounded. So from my averaging, it's about 23%, which is almost a quarter of the value of your dollar was undermined, devalued by the Biden administration. So that's an overall tax of 25 cents on the dollar, an extra 25% that you're taxed. So the reason is, and that's what PJ Media is putting up, that the Democrats just make things more expensive by spending more money, and which raises inflation. And then they say they're helping you, but they don't. When has the government ever made things cheaper? And I hate when politicians say this, or when constituents say this, they go, we need you to lower prices. How does the government lower prices? Explain. Leave a comment. Article goes on to say an entire generation of new voters is said to be completely overwhelmed by how expensive it is to live, independently work, support their matcha or craft beer habit, and make their student loan payments. You know, and I happen to agree with that. It is very expensive, but it's always been very expensive. It's more expensive now. And the reasoning being is that things, first of all, there's the cost of goods and whatever. Housing, the housing market was upended during predatory lending schemes and stuff like that. And so you have to look at how pricing increased after 2008. That the housing loan crisis that was precipitated by predatory lending. The George Bush administration made it perfectly legal to put these interest-only loans out there, which is predatory, because they say you could buy this house, your mortgage payment will be $1,000 a month. And they go, well, when the ARM comes up and the insurance rate and the interest rate goes up, then you just refinance, unless you can't refinance, which happened. And so that was the problem. So sure, it's the establishment. It makes everything more expensive. We're trying to get away from that, obviously. And I want to tell people that the easiest way to make money is to have your own business. Because if you're waiting for that pay raise, you're going to be in trouble. Especially if you still have the same job you had before the Biden administration, because the only way to make up that inflation is to get another job, because you'll get it at a higher rate. In any case, it says Barack Obama's takeover of the student loan program wildly inflated the cost of college tuition. Indeed, it did. And student loans. But that, along with Joe Biden's gratuitously lavish spending during his disastrous term, sent the economy into a tailspin. Inflation. The only body who can address your situation is yourself. No one's coming to the rescue. The government doesn't control pricing. Price controls don't work. And that's socialist. You think socialism works? Go for it. There are two ways to create value, really, create wealth. To innovate, and that's to capitalize. So either you think of a new idea, build a better mousetrap, so to speak, or you capitalize on somebody else's innovation. Those are the two ways to create value, which then creates wealth. Figure it out. And this is the same thing with it applies also to being an employee, right? If you're working for somebody, well, I don't know if you're stocking shelves or whatever, if you innovate, if you think about, if you devise a better way to stock shelves so your productivity improves, then your life will improve. Or if you capitalize on an idea that you see somewhere else and you apply it to what you're doing at work and increase your productivity, and hopefully your boss notices, little tip. It's easier to do when you have your own business. Fox News, Trump asks Supreme Court to overturn E. Jean Carroll's case verdict. E. Jean Carroll sued President Trump twice after she released a book in 2019. Okay, we know about this case. I'm just going to point it out here really quickly. The $5 million verdict was propped up by a series of indefensible evidentiary rulings by the judge that allowed Carroll's lawyers to present highly inflammatory propensity evidence against Trump. President Trump has clearly and consistently denied that this supposed incident ever occurred. It's doubtful that it did. No physical or DNA evidence corroborates Carroll's story. There was no eyewitnesses, there was no video evidence, and no police report or investigation. People don't understand that this was a defamation case. And the judges said, well, she told a couple friends about it 20 years ago, and so we're just going to rule that he did it. And that because he did it and he said these things, then we're ruling for the complainant in this defamation case. The point is, if it never happened, if the judge didn't rule that it happened, it wouldn't be defamation because Trump would have been correct by calling her crazy and a liar, which she obviously was. So she's crazy and a liar. There's no defamation if you call somebody what they are. Moving right along, just the news. Trump's pardons could bolster defense in state January 6 case under the Supremacy Clause. Trump supporters contesting a federal election outcome can't be charged with state crimes if the federal government doesn't deem their conduct criminal. So it's about the Supremacy Clause, okay? So the federal government rules, basically how it works. And what they're saying is if it would be hard for the states to bring crimes against January 6th defendants if indeed these folks weren't deemed criminally liable by the federal government because it's a federal case. Trespassing at the Capitol, riotous behavior, whatever. Moving right along, we're going to the Federalist. Now, this is a big case here. I don't like mail-in ballots. I call them mail-out ballots because there's a chain of custody issue that needs to be addressed. Nobody's addressing it, and that's my problem. Mail-in ballots, absentee ballots, fine. You send in your proof of your identity and that you're a registered voter, and you can get your absentee ballot in the mail. I don't have a problem with absentee balloting. But people conflate absentee balloting with mass mail-out ballots. I'm going to get to that. The Federalist, SCOTUS to decide whether states can accept mail ballots received after Election Day. Before COVID, most states held voting on Election Day and the results were tallied after the polls closed. Yeah. I mean, this, like I said, I'm for one-day voting, in-person voting, unless you apply for a absentee ballot. And you could just get rid of the restrictions. There used to be restrictions for obtaining absentee ballots. So get rid of those restrictions so anybody can get an absentee ballot. You don't need an excuse, but you have to prove who you are and then prove you're a registered voter and prove you're a citizen, realistically. So the Supreme Court has agreed to issue a decision on a major election security issue related to mail-in ballots. Should ballots be counted only until Election Day, or should ballots that trickle in days after or weeks after election be counted too? We know Election Day set by Congress is the Tuesday after the first Monday in November, but is that only the deadline for voting with counting happening days later? That is left to be seen. The case Watson versus Republican National Committee centers on a Mississippi complaint by the Republican National Committee about a law allowing ballots postmarked on or before Election Day to be counted up to 5 business days after the election. So what this is the Supreme Court is looking at a law about this state, Mississippi, said we're not counting ballots that are received after Election Day. And this guy Watson is suing the Republican National Committee because they are the ones that voted this law in. It means ballots from Tuesday election could arrive the following Tuesday and still be counted as long as a postmark meets the criteria, which is supposed to be postmarked before Election Day. The Libertarian Party of Mississippi filed a similar case. There are similar laws in some 30 states. This is the point. It means ballots from a Tuesday election could arrive the following Tuesday and still be counted. as long as the postmark meets the criteria. I have a huge issue with this. Election day. If you're voting by mail, absentee ballot, you have to get it in the mail well before election day. Should be received before election day. Different states have different criteria, which is good. And the reason this law was in place in the first place was for absentee ballots from service members overseas, where sometimes it would get lost in the mail or get delayed because it's coming from overseas. But this doesn't apply to you living 2 blocks away from your polling place. You're too fucking lazy to get up and go to the polling place, so you want to fill it out and send it in the mail, which sidesteps the chain of custody, which means there are ballots floating around out there. And I'm going to get to what is wrong with this in a second. Like mask on preschoolers, mail-in ballots became prevalent during the COVID pandemic. Before COVID, most states held voting on election day, and the results were tallied after the polls closed. During that time, Democrats were pushing for no-excuse votings. Those who were sick, out of town, or in the military had an excuse to request an absentee ballot, which I'm fine with. The majority of people voted in person. Democrats promoted the no-excuse method before COVID and tried to open mail-in voting for all, which they did. Many states have recently adopted post-election receipt of mail-in ballots. The RNC wrote in a brief for the case, these states risk the chaos and suspicions of impropriety that can ensue if thousands of absentee ballots flow in after election and potentially flip the result after election. That's the point, is you have ballots streaming in from God knows who. They're all just at the ready. See, the problem with cheating on an election is that you have to know what the end tally of your opponent is before you can override it. So what they used to do before is pad the ballot, which means you'd put in an extra 10,000 votes for your candidate. But sometimes, like with Trump, he's so popular that he'd override the pad. So now they figured out a way. How many votes does Trump have? Okay, let's just get that number of votes we need in. PJ Media, the morning briefing. Will SCOTUS bring a modicum of sanity to mail-in ballot madness? Supreme Court will hear the case that decide if Election Day actually exists in America anymore. SCOTUS will decide if states can accept mail-in ballots days after the designated election day. U.S. Constitution designates election day, but leaves it to the states to hold the elections. As a result, several Democratic states have adopted rules that literally change the meaning of election day by counting ballots, usually mail-in votes, after election day has passed. Election day. It used to be with absentee ballots, it has to be received before election day. Like I said, the point of the cheat is to know what your opposition's count is, his vote count, and then, or her vote count, and then get enough ballots in, as long as you don't exceed the number of registered voters, and that's the issue. It doesn't matter how many people actually vote, it's how many registered voters, because then you could just take their ballot and put it in. In the beginning of mail-in ballots, what they were doing was they were just throwing a bunch of ballots into the count, and in a few districts, there were more ballots than registered voters. So they had to be very careful that they don't exceed the number of registered voters. And at some points in some districts, it's like 99% turnout, which is unheard of, but possible. The longer that mail-in ballots are out there floating around in the universe, the more that can go wrong. Indeed, that invites fraud. Out of the chain of custody. Democrats love to claim that it's all on the up and up, but anything nefarious that might go on with them will happen during parts of the process that aren't filled with transparency. And it's not really transparency, it's chain of custody, which is the transparent part. You have to know where ballots are from the printing to the counting, and even after. So the author here puts forth an anecdote. For the last 6 days he lived in California. He was on permanent vote-by-mail list, a list that he never once opted in on. Every election, he would fill out a provisional ballot and request to be taken off the vote-by-mail list, which never happened. After he moved back to Arizona for a few years, he checked and was still registered in California on the list, even though he requested to be removed. And he goes on to say that his old mailbox in Los Angeles wasn't secure, which means it wasn't a slot in a secured area of his building, alcove or foyer or whatever. It was just, regular open and closed mailbox. Mail-in ballots shouldn't exist. I'm not talking about absentee ballots. I'm talking about mail-out ballots, and that's how they cheated in 2020. And the only reason it didn't work in 2024 is because the Republicans, the Trump team, had lawyers and poll watchers everywhere. There were even a couple sites, counting sites, where big trucks filled with ballots, presumably, backed up to the polling places. And then the Republicans came up there and said, "What is this?" And the trucks drove away. Going to go over to the Daily Caller now. 2026 midterms will be a bloodbath for Republicans because of a new big tech strategy. It's not it's an old one. And we're talking about Richard Epstein here. And he explained rigorous controlled research conducted by himself and his research team, all published in prestigious peer-reviewed scientific journals, shows that Google can shift between 20 and 80% of the undecided voters towards one candidate without people's awareness. National election, they can easily shift 10 million votes or more to their favorite candidate, which is usually left-leaning. So we know this, so that's on the horizon as well, right? It's internet-based mind control. So basically how the Google thing works is you type in candidates for so-and-so for whatever district or whatever, and the Democrat or the liberals always come up first and more often and more favorably. Don't forget that Wikipedia entry where it said it listed definitions for Republican, it listed Nazi. National Review has the headline, Newsom in Brazil blasts Trump, praises China. Again, this is like Trudeau in Canada. Why are you praising China? Because he's a communist. Well, he's a socialist. He's a liberal. He's a socialist masking himself as a liberal. And now he wants to become president. And he thinks he can be more popular than Trump. Good luck. Kash Patel is in China. Went on a secret trip to China last week amid criticism of his private jet usage, and that's just the Independent. What's really spooky about the whole thing is that during this dust-up over the January 6th pipe bomber, he's nowhere to be found, and he's in China. I originally thought that the pipe bomber might have been a Chinese person. You could see it's either a young kid, because it's very slight, a woman, or an Asian person. And now they think it's this Capitol Police officer. Could very well be. Could well be. But the problem with the Independent article there in the National Review is communist. It's communist China, not just China. It's communist China. I wouldn't refer to communist Cuba. I would refer to communist Cuba. Venezuela is still kind of socialist. It's not full communist, but you could call it communist Venezuela. But you have to let people know that our director of FBI is in communist China. For what purpose, who knows? FBI director flew to Beijing for Saturday talks on stopping illegal drug trade. That might be the cover. Who knows? Every time you look at Kash Patel now, he's like the cat that ate the canary. Deer in the headlights. Just the News has the headline, DHS spokeswoman Tricia McLaughlin separates fact from fiction on stories about ICE. We know this. The assistant secretary highlighted reports in Los Angeles and Chicago where stories claim federal agents kidnapped children when the parents were allegedly attacking immigration officers and federal law enforcement, then taking the children out of dangerous situations. Not kidnapping them. They didn't keep the children. Other news stories claimed that ICE agents used pepper spray on children and abducted illegal immigrants from courthouses where they were allegedly attending immigration hearings. Never happened. One of the stories, ICE officer allegedly took a child from her parents and allegedly gave her to relatives with a rash, bruise, and a dirty diaper. McLaughlin said that actually happened was a U.S. citizen wielded a hammer at law enforcement and threw rocks at law enforcement while he had a child in his car. He also illegally had a gun. So this is what happens if you have your child and you commit a crime and you're detained or arrested. They take your child and they put it in protective custody. She goes on to say that these are continuous smears. Another case from Chicago claimed that ICE officers used pepper spray on a child in Sam's Club parking lot, which McLaughlin denied and claimed that people had attacked the federal officers instead. During the operation, rioters began throwing objects at agents and blocking the road. This did not occur in Sam's Club parking lot. Border Patrol deployed crowd control measures and safely cleared the area when rioters impede law enforcement operations. They are putting themselves, officers, and others in danger. Thank you. Who's popping? Trump will rig the midterms. Okay. How do you suppose he does that? Please chime in. More news from the post-millennial. Violence and arrests at Berkeley as Antifa swarms TPUSA event mocks Charlie Kirk's death. Well, isn't that nice? I thought Antifa doesn't exist. At least 2 people were arrested on campus after a fight broke out between a Trump supporter and Antifa member. The Trump supporter, who was left bloodied, claimed the Antifa member had tried to rob him. Antifa members attempted to de-arrest the member being arrested by police. Then it has a tweet here. Antifa protesters have rushed the entrance of tonight's TPUSA event, attempting to break down barriers. Attendees were all rushed behind police. Arrest another anti-TPUSA protester has been arrested. That's what they're reporting. Antifa and agitators rushing barricades. Fascists out of Berkeley. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, John Rotten. MAGA Republicans suck. Do they? I think it's actually historically one of the biggest and best run political movements in American history. Just the News is reporting appeals court bans punishing students for using biological pronouns, not disruptive, harassing. If you didn't know this, an appeals court ruled that you don't need to use gendered language And if you dead name someone or misgender them, it's certainly not a crime. It's not harassment. Public universities in Ohio, Michigan, Kentucky, and Tennessee have been on notice for 4 years that they cannot force faculty to use students' preferred pronouns. Unconstitutional. It's called compelled speech. Last week, those states' K through 12 schools got the same message as it applied to student speech. The full 6 U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals ordered a lower court to issue an appropriately tailored preliminary injunction, so it's not a permanent ruling, that bans Ohio's Olentangy local school district from punishing students for commonplace use of biological pronouns, misgendering, as distinct from the abuse of transgender students in violation of harassment policies. So they're saying that people can be harassed. So it's different if you're harassing transgender people, calling them names, stuff like that. It's different than accidentally calling someone a boy when they say they're a girl, that sort of thing. It's misgendering. It's not a crime. Sorry. Hoorah, Marines, 250th birthday of the Marines. So my shout out to the Marines on Veterans Day. So hoorah. More from Johnny Rotten. Democrats voted to open the government because people were starting to suffer. Now the government is open. All suffering is directly due to MAGA BS. Oh, yes. Much suffering. Get a job. New York Times, FDA. Thank you, John Rotten. FDA will remove black box warnings from hormone treatments for menopause. The benefits of hormone replacement have been underappreciated. Dr. Marty McCary, the agency's commissioner, said on Monday critics described the evidence for the change as insufficient. This is a misnomer. And we're going to get into that. So black box warnings are warnings that are issued to the prescribing doctor only. Patients don't see it. So the physician sees it and is supposed to warn the patient accordingly or not prescribe the medication if it interacts with either a pre-existing condition or some medication that they might be on. So the New York Times makers are like, oh no, they're gonna hurt people. No, they're not gonna hurt people. First of all, hormone pills did not protect against heart disease or dementia, and in fact, raised the risk of blood clots and breast cancer. That's the issue that they're trying to prevent. But they just took that out of the black box warnings and put it into the insert. Hormone replacement therapy may improve the health outcomes of women at population level more than any other intervention, arguably, with the exception of antibiotics or vaccines. So it does help people's health. He added that any patient with a predisposition to blood clots or history of breast cancer fueled by hormones should avoid it. And removing the black box warning and putting the warnings in a lengthy label that many doctors and most patients will not read. Why won't they read it? That's the whole point. So they took the black box warning away, which doctors were the only ones that see it. Patients don't even say that. And they put it in the warning insert that is there for people to read. The New York Times just said, oh, people don't read that. Black box warnings also don't compel physicians to give that warnings to patients. That's just there for their discretion. And it's not on the box, by the way. And they're putting it in the insert so both doctors and patients can read it. And they just say that they won't read it. So actually, they're making the warnings more transparent instead of less transparent. So I love when, people comment, always, these leftists, they comment, but they don't. That's why we read the news here, because when you read the news, right, you can refer back versus watch something on a video or whatever. You can refer back to that quote and say, as we do here, I saw in the Post-Millennial, I saw in the New York Times, I saw wherever, the Daily Caller, wherever you want to quote, The Nation, I saw this reported, so this backs up my argument instead of just throwing out political rhetoric or ad hominem. Post-Millennial, Elon Musk says Tesla Optimus robot will eliminate poverty, provide amazing medical care. Optimus will actually eliminate poverty. Well, I don't know about that, Elon, but whatever. So there you go. So young people don't need jobs. They just need an Optimus robot. It's going to eliminate poverty. You know what? You don't have to go to work anymore. You just send your robot instead. No, actually, your employer will hire a robot to replace you because the robot won't come in late. It doesn't need to take the day off, doesn't need to take smoke breaks, doesn't want to raise, doesn't want to take vacation, doesn't need health insurance, etc. More in tech news. Washington Post, inside the debate over tech breakthrough raising questions about life itself, AI-designed viruses raise fears over creating life. But all the suffering is MAGA BS. It's not. It's progressive. So you don't understand, and that's what Silicon Valley is all about, is progressives technologically being progressive, regardless of the outcome. The problem with progressives is that they do not care about or even think about the unforeseen consequences of their actions. They just do it, right? Let's borrow lots of money and send out checks to everybody. Ooh, that caused inflation. Sorry. So going on with this article from the Washington Post, machines are rethinking what it is to be human, what it is to be alive, said Michael Heck, the chemistry professor at Princeton University. I find this very unsettling and staggering. They are devising, coming up with novel life forms. It's Darwin 2.0. Are machines about to generate novel forms of life, including ones that could kill us all? Isn't that the problem? Is suffering. First of all, you have agency in a free country, in a republic. You could do whatever you want to do, as long as you don't hurt others or destroy their property. You have agency. So usually your condition is pretty much brought about by your own actions. Now, some people have to start out at a worse place, but you always have the agency to improve your condition. So if you're looking to the government to do things to help you, that's not what governments do. Hey, I'm not the Keynesian here. I'm not the one that believes that debt doesn't matter. There's $1 trillion of taxpayer money, $1 trillion, that goes to service the debt every year. What could $1 trillion? Well, $1 trillion could subsidize you buying a house, or it could subsidize your health care. But we don't have that money because we spent more than we had in the first place. Thanks, everybody, for joining me, including Who's Poppin' and John Rotten. Don't forget to engage the channel, like, subscribe, leave a comment. Appreciate you. Share the podcast. Join me every day, Monday through Friday, live stream 10 a.m. on Rumble. Thank you very much. Also, join me tonight, live stream 9:15 for another edition of Tuesdays with Perry, where Perry and I discuss some of the latest breaking news and some of the latest trends. Remember, you're under attack psychologically and biologically. not by MAGA, not by Donald Trump, but likely by the establishment, scientism, mad science. Because as technology progressives, science progressives, progressivism, they do not consider the unforeseen consequences of their actions. All right. Appreciate you. Hopefully I'll see you tonight for Tuesdays with Perry. If not, I'll see you tomorrow. Respect.
The New World Order. The New World Order.
This is a conspiracy. That's what this is.
I'm Donald Trump, and I approve this message.